If you've been keeping up with Custopia these past few years, you know that one of my favorite characters is Berdly. Now, I'm no Berdly lover 555, but I really do think he's a good character. And while I have made a video in the past talking about why I love him, it's both unserious and quite old. I also don't like how I sound in it. To all the people in my comments talking about my voice, I know. Anyways, today I'm gonna be talking about all the reasons I love Berdly as a character, detailing his story, personality, and growth. Because, although it's not obvious, he's actually a pretty complex character. And I know a handful of other YouTubers already talked about him, but I just want to say my own piece too. I haven't exactly watched any of the other videos, so if I repeat their talking points, my bad. I'll also be diving into the more controversial parts of his character, detailing his flaws and explaining why they make him more complex. And, of course, we're gonna have to talk about Berdly's scenes in Chapter 5, because despite having negative screen time, they elevate his character even more. And if you find yourself liking my videos, become a channel member, and I'll add your OC as a background character in them forever. For more details, check the pinned post in my community tab. Anyways, sit back, relax, and listen to an adult man talk about why he loves Berdly. Let's start things off by quickly going over Berdly in Chapter 1. And right out the gate, we learn that he's kind of a dick. Not even kind of, he just acts like a jerk. And this stupid face sprite. God, the game just wanted me to dislike him. But despite this, I didn't really hate him. I've personally always liked characters who start off as jerks, like Rexplode from Invincible and Sokka from Avatar. Although we really didn't get to see him too much in this chapter, we learn about his job in the library, how he cares a lot for good grades, and that Rudy really wants to throw things at him. With Chris happily trying to make that happen. But even this early in the game, we can interpret things like Berdly being relieved Chris survived hanging out with Susie as genuine, since his look of surprise makes that line seem unsarcastic. It's a minuscule glimpse into Berdly that shows us how he might have some care under all that ego. But let's get into the real meat, or poultry I guess, of Berdly's development. With Chapter 2 being the place we can truly dive into Berdly as a character. And as we start the chapter, we learn that, yup, he's still a dick. But we also see moments throughout the chapter where Berdly, despite having a massive ego, shows his softer side. There's a lot to talk about, so we should divide this into Berdly's overall development, his relationships with other people, and finally, his own personal struggle with identity. Going into his development, Berdly's an egotistical, condescending guy, with him constantly demeaning the members of the Fun Gang for their lack of intelligence. But despite his mockery, he continuously gets humbled, whether it be physically or mentally. With these humblings coming to a peak when Susie, a person who Berdly always considered dumb, manages to solve a puzzle before him, leading to her calling him out, telling him that he was just as dumb as everyone else. And after admitting defeat and telling his tragic backstory, Susie and Lancer comfort him, telling Berdly that no one would care if he was stupid. With those words, he ends up joining the Fun Gang on their quest to save Noelle and defeat Queen. And during his time with Chris and the others, he drops his egotistical mask, to the point where he proudly tells Noelle that he's dumb. But despite how much Berdly changed during his time in the cyber world, at the end of the chapter, he ends up thinking that everything that happened was a dream, causing him to re-don that egotistical mask. In this chapter, we also learn more about Berdly's status as a pro gamer, and a passionate one at that, something that will be important later on. So, in short, Berdly goes from an egotistical jerk to someone more humble who accepts his flaws, and then back to an egotistical guy who cares about the people he calls his friends. Speaking of friends, one of the most important aspects of Berdly's character is how he interacts with the people around him. When it comes to Berdly, his most prominent relationship is with his closest friend Noelle. Despite Berdly's ego, we can see that he really cares about Noelle, and although his view of their relationship is very incorrect, he really does want to keep her safe. In fact, almost all the actions Berdly takes in the cyber world are done, in his eyes, to protect Noelle. We can truly see that care firsthand during the Weird Route. with Berdly turning off his egotistical persona in order to lock in against Chris when he felt like they were hurting Noelle. And it's a real shame how one of his most noble moments came right before his proceeding. So it's quite obvious that he truly does care for Noelle. But, of course, it wouldn't really be a Berdly video without talking about the flaws in their relationship. Berdly often talks over Noelle, puts himself above her in terms of the school's hierarchy of intellect, and, of course, believes she secretly has feelings for him, treating her like a fragile maiden he needs to protect. That's another thing about Berdly. He's a pretty romance-minded dude, with him seeing Susie and Noelle as potential love interests during the events of Chapter 2. And I gotta be honest, watching him interact with Susie, Noelle, and Queen is rough. But I've seen a lot of people in the Deltarune fandom, especially on Twitter, label Berdly as a misogynist due to the way he treats women. Whether it be in the ways he talks about them, or how he believes they want to be in relationships with him. And I gotta say that no, Berdly is not a misogynist. I don't believe that he has a bias against women. He talks down to Chris just as much as Susie. And hell, he even views Chris as a love interest. I think if he had a couple of positive interactions with Ralsei, he'd view him as a love interest too. I think the reason people view him as a misogynist is because he only interacts with women and Chris. And he spoke to Ralsei and Lancer like once. But I think Berdly is less of a misogynist and more of an everyonetionist. Now, while I am adamant that Berdly's not a misogynist, his actions can definitely be seen as misogynistic, since the things he does do objectively put down a woman. But I feel like those actions weren't done to target gender, and come from a lack of self-awareness and emotional intelligence, despite what Berdly says. You can not be a misogynist and still take misogynistic actions. Going back to the Noelle stuff, while Berdly does treat her as this helpless girl he needs to protect, what's interesting is why he does it. One speculation I've seen is that it's because of Berdly's hobby as a gamer that gives him this desire to protect Noelle, as many games involve a strong hero saving a helpless woman. And while this could be possible, I have another idea. During Berdly's backstory, we know that the last two finalists of the Spelling Bee were him and Noelle, and during the final round, Noelle freezes up, causing Berdly to win and crave approval for his intellect. Now we all know the reason why Noelle froze was because the last word of the competition was December. You know, like her potentially dead sister. But I don't know if Berdly actually knows that. I believe the reason why Berdly acts the way he does with her is because he genuinely believes she has trouble talking to other people, after seeing what happened to her in the Spelling Bee. It's the reason why he tells Noelle at the start of Chapter 2 that he'll read instead of her in order to valiantly take this blow of humiliation. While his actions with Noelle are partially rooted in his need to be the smartest, I genuinely do believe that Berdly thinks he needs to protect Noelle. I'm not trying to excuse Berdly's actions or anything. Hell, even though he wanted to create a dark world where he and Noelle could be free from any kind of academic or personal stress, he still stated that he'd be number 1 while she was number 2. There was definitely some inherent selfishness in the way he treated Noelle, which we'll cover when we focus on his identity. But despite his selfishness, his desire to keep her safe was so strong that he was willing to destroy his arm if it meant saving her. But overall, I do believe that Noelle and Berdly are genuine friends. They both suffer from problems in the light world, with the two of them using the dark world to escape from their real-life problems. And at the end of Chapter 2, it's nice that Berdly apologizes to Noelle for always causing her trouble. He even offers to be her wingman in Chapter 5 when she goes on a date with Susie. I also really like the fact that when Noelle tells Berdly that she's on a date with Susie, he's immediately supportive. And if you make Chris vote Noelle and Berdly for Festival King and Queen, he scolds them, telling Chris that they should have asked for Noelle's permission. These scenes show that even though Berdly has a big ego, he also has a big heart. These two have a genuine bond. Speaking of genuine bonds, you know who doesn't have a genuine bond with Berdly? Susie. Okay, that's not entirely true. I just wanted a smooth segue. But it's clear that Berdly and Susie's relationship for a majority of Chapter 2 was very rocky. Constantly mocking someone's intelligence does that. But despite the two of them not really being friends, it's because of Susie and an assist from Lancer that sets Berdly on the path of acceptance about his identity. And one small pep talk and a video game reference later, Berdly becomes head over heels for her. Feelings she most definitely does not reciprocate. Something else that I never noticed about Susie and Berdly's dynamic is that in a weird way, they kind of mirror each other. Both Susie and Berdly at the start of the game wear these metaphorical masks as a way of hiding their true personalities, with Susie putting on this mean girl and brutish persona, while Berdly's was one of intellect and superiority. Both of their masks were developed through their childhoods. The difference is that Susie's persona involved her pushing others away, while Berdly wanted all eyes on him. In order for Berdly to change, he needed someone to call out his actions, and I believe that Susie was the perfect person to do it. Next we have Chris, the only non-female character who has a substantial relationship with Berdly. And man, Berdly and Chris have a good dynamic. If only there was an 11-minute video made last year discussing their relationship. Oh well. But to put it shortly, Chris, like Susie, is another person who throws a wrench into Berdly's high and mighty persona, whether it be pranking him or beating him at video games. But while the two of them are kinda rivals, the question if they're actually friends is kind of up in the air. But no matter their relationship, Berdly views Chris as a love interest, showing how he seems to view anyone his age being nice to him as wanting to date him, not just women. And their relationship gets even more interesting during the events of Chapter 5. Where'd you get that feather, Chris? And finally, we have one of Berdly's most important dynamics, his relationship with Queen. Their dynamic is incredibly interesting. Queen's constant neglect of him to the point where she forgets his name is incredibly sad, made even more depressing by the fact that he constantly tries to impress her and gain her approval. And if you believe in the universal mother theory, the belief that Queen acts like each of the kids' real-life mothers when talking to them, it just makes Berdly's home life even more sad. But something really interesting about their dynamic is that despite Queen's neglect and annoyance towards Berdly, she actually forced him to serve under her. At the start of the game, she's right in the fact that she didn't ask Berdly to join her team. She made him, using Noelle's safety as a bargaining chip. It shows that Queen is a lot more malicious than most people think, and also shows Berdly's more noble side, especially in his attempts to defy her. Through his relationships, we can see how complex Berdly is as a character, going beyond his persona of superiority. But even though his relationships are important, there's one more big aspect of Berdly's character that I love. Now, one of the greatest aspects about Berdly's character and Deltarune as a whole is its emphasis on identity. Each character in the game struggles with their identity, whether it be Chris acting as a vessel for an otherworldly being, Ralsei struggling with his self-worth and purpose, and Susie with her mean girl persona and place in the light world. And Berdly is no different. But to me personally, I feel like Berdly's struggles with identity are the most relatable. As we all know, Berdly is a character that craves approval, a need that most likely comes from a lack of parental attention growing up, as we never see Berdly's parents throughout the entire game, even when he's in a coma. He viewed himself as somebody everyone forgot about, and it wasn't until winning the spelling bee against Noelle that he gained his first taste of approval and praise. I love the interpretation that the crown and massive roars from the audience were all exaggerated. It was just how Berdly was feeling at that current moment. And after gaining that taste of approval, he began to strive to be intellectually number one. He works hard to try and be the number one student in the class. But what's so compelling about how hard Berdly works is that he doesn't just want to be number one. He feels like he has to be. He tells Chris, Susie, and Lancer that he feels everyone's expectations of him pressing down, and worries that without Noelle, he'd lose his spot as the smartest kid. And that's the other interesting aspect about Berdly's protectiveness of Noelle, because while he does genuinely care about her, his protectiveness can be interpreted as him wanting to keep his own ego and identity stable. I think one of the main reasons he calls Noelle helpless without him is because he's projecting his insecurities onto her. Despite what he says, he believes that without Noelle, he's the one that's helpless. He feels like he has to be the number one smartest kid, because without that label, who even is he? He'll just go back to being someone nobody pays attention to. Berdly's lack of both attention and approval as a child also manifested in his relationships with other people. Like I said previously, He believes that the classmates who interact with him in the most mundane of ways are actually in love with him, a viewpoint that not only stemmed from his emotional neglect, but also his deep love of video games. Berdly is an avid gamer, with his love of games manifesting in his personality. Now, while this is just speculation, I believe his chivalrous and knightly persona came from his time playing video games, and his skewed views on romance reflecting both harem-style visual novels and a lack of meaningful connections. And I know thinking Berdly plays anime-esque visual novels is just a theory, but he straight up calls Suzy a yandere. I think he consumes that kind of media. And finally, when looking at Berdly, we have to talk about his identity beyond his intellect. Because what's so genuinely great about him is that after he accepted that it was okay to not hold himself to such a high standard, his other talents began to shine. For one, Berdly's fighting skills and adaptation to the cyberworld were genuinely impressive, as despite only being in the cyberworld for a short period of time, he was able to put up a decent fight against the Fun Gang alone, despite the three of them already being decently experienced. Not only that, but he surprisingly has decent aspects of being a leader. He's the one who created the plan to save Noelle from Queen, which the Fun Gang followed. And while it was foiled, I feel like that was inevitable trying to trick a computer. He was also the one who gathered everyone together at the end of the game to save the Fun Gang and defeat Queen. It shows that despite his insecurities, Berdly's more than just his brain. And despite his complete lack of self-worth, I don't believe that Berdly's actually stupid. I believe that the standards he set for himself as the #1 smartest kid and his reliance on Noelle made him believe that on the inside, he truly wasn't enough. But the second he dropped that identity, he became more competent. If I had to describe Berdly, it would be that he's dumber than he says he is, but smarter than he thinks he is. His struggle with identity and his place in the world is one that's incredibly relatable. And with that, we can finally answer the most important question of the video. So, after all that I've said, you're probably still asking, Koos, why do you love Berdly so much? Well, dear viewer, it's because he's genuinely relatable. A tone-deaf, annoying nerd is exactly what I was during the first half of high school. The only difference is that I didn't think people who were being nice were madly in love with me. Berdly is a flawed character, but it's those flaws that make him so compelling. But by far, the biggest aspect of Berdly that I love the most is his struggle with identity. If you didn't know, I love making YouTube videos. It's genuinely so much fun to do, and from it, I've grown a decently sized audience. I give myself these massive expectations because YouTube is all I do. If I'm not the best YouTuber I can be, then who am I? And while each character has their own struggles with identity, I feel like I relate to Berdly's the most. Now, is a lot of what I said in this video speculation and interpretation? Yes. Am I kinda potential manning Berdly? A little. But his insecurities and flaws, along with how much he cares for the people around him deep down, make Berdly one of my favorite characters in Deltarune. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and with that, my name is Koostopia, and I will see you all next time.